Hello, internet viewing world. Another video to shock and entertain the masses. So since this is the fourth or fifth video I've posted, maybe it's time to answer some basic questions. Like, what the hell does Acedian frame and bowed yoga mean? Where did I get them from? So, Acedian frame I got from one of my forays into Wikipedia some unspecified amount of time ago. And according to Wikipedia, acedia describes a state of listlessness or torpor, of not caring or not being concerned with one's position or condition in the world. And you can probably see how that would apply to my life. And then frame would just refer to like a frame of mind, or it could also refer to frames as in glasses, like that's my way of viewing the world. And bowed yoga, I just grabbed from an anime show I used to watch a while ago. I just combined a name and, well, I don't want to give too much away. That'd probably embarrass myself. But suffice it to say, I did grab it from an anime. Alright, so one of the main questions that I had in mind for this one is, have I ever been in any perilous or near-death experience? Well, as I've said before, I'm kind of a boring person. I haven't so much as even been in a fight that I can remember. And I don't really get out much, so there's not really much opportunity for me to do something dangerous. But I have almost died in recent memory, and not from anything I did to myself. It happened about going on a year ago, actually, where I was driving home from work. This was during a time where I worked the afternoon to night shift, so I was coming home around 8 p.m. Now, the place where I work at tends to get pretty dark at night because there are no street lights around the area. The only lights around come from people's houses, and those are far off the road. So the only thing lighting up the drive home would be your car's headlights. So I'm on the way home, I'm just leaving the place of work, and if I remember correctly, I had got it into my mind to call somebody. Either to call somebody or to check some text message that I had gotten. You can probably see where this is going. So I reached for my phone, and when I looked back up from it for a second, I noticed there was a guy on a bicycle in front of me. Now, what he was doing on a bicycle with no lights or reflector panels in the middle of the night, driving in the middle of the road, I couldn't begin to tell you. But I did notice him, and he was pretty close to my car. I came pretty close to hitting him. So I jerked my steering wheel to the left to avoid hitting him. Thank God there were no oncoming cars. But I jerked my car to the left, go into a field of like plowed land where they were about to plant some stuff. I hit a dip in the road. My car did a couple barrel rolls, like Star Fox style barrel rolls, and I ended up with the roof of my car on the ground and me hanging upside down. Thank goodness I had my seatbelt on, huh? The car was completely totaled, like we couldn't really salvage it. But after everything had stopped spinning, I was just, I guess, a little bit stunned, like, so that really happened, huh? Again, I had my seatbelt on, so I was just hanging from the ceiling of the car attached to the seat. So I undid the seatbelt and fell to the floor, which was the roof of the car, and crawled to the back of the car, because the back seat windows were all completely shattered. They were all gone, and the ones in the front were a bit too compressed for me to crawl through. So I went to the back and I crawled out the back windows, and I managed to get out of the car that way. The car wasn't smoking or anything. Funnily enough, the radio was still on, but it was still a bit eerie, to say the least, to be inside the car. So I crawled out through the back. When I crawled out, the first thing I did was look around to see where the guy on the bicycle was, to see if I had avoided hitting him. That dude was gone. Didn't stay to see if I was alright. Didn't stick around. He was just gone. But a car was pulled over on the side of the road that was coming in the direction that I was going from, and she was already on the phone with an ambulance and with the police. Funnily enough, I crawled out of the car without so much as a scratch. The only thing I had was a neck ache, I guess from some whiplash, but no broken bones, no glass embedded anywhere, no real lasting injury of any kind. People called it the grace of God. I was covered in the blood of God, which I always thought was a creepy saying, but so there you have it. That was the one time that I can really think of that I could say I was close to dying. What did that affect? Now, what effect did that have on me? At the time, not really all that much. I can't say it really made me happier or more grateful to be alive. I'm not gonna lie and say it did. I'm not gonna say it really made me live life to the fullest. In fact, point of order, about for a few days after it happened, I was actually thinking to myself that it would have been better. It would have been easier if I had just snapped my neck while the car was rolling, that if I had just died in that crash, things would have been a bit easier. It would have sucked to put my mom and stepfather out one car, but yeah, like I wouldn't have wanted to deprive them of a car, but I think I would have been fine with dying there. It's funny because when my mom was picking me up from the accident scene and driving us home, she was kind of trying to joke, trying to calm me down, trying to joke, trying to put some levity in the situation. And she's like, "Yo, you're gonna have trouble sleeping tonight. You're gonna have nightmares." I had no nightmares. I was fine. It was like nothing. If anything, that's the thing. I was more, if anything, made me feel mad or shocked or annoyed or anything, it was that, fuck, we're down a car. It wasn't, no, holy shit, I almost died. It was, we're down a car. We didn't need this right now. And of course I blame myself. I mean, I was checking my phone. But that's about it for perilous or dangerous situations. And as I said, that didn't really do much to change my outlook on life on its own. I did feel kind of good and kind of like I felt some companionship because a couple of the friends that I had made out and out forced me to go to the hospital because I wasn't going to go myself. So one of them came to the house and dropped me off at the hospital, and another one picked me up and let me pick up the painkillers that they prescribed. So that made me feel pretty good. I was still annoyed they forced me to go to the hospital, but the gestures did make me feel very good. I don't like going to the hospital. So what are some of the challenges that I'm facing now that I'm on the path to changing my way of thinking? Well, the main obstacle is getting over my past way of thinking, getting over my, I guess, current way of thinking. Because back then and even now, one thing to understand is when you don't really care about your position in the world, when you don't really care about living, it's pretty hard to come up with goals for yourself. You don't really think of yourself as having a future, so working towards a goal just becomes a bit... My toe! Alright. Working towards a goal just becomes a bit almost pointless. Just yeah, it's because hell, I went to college, I just picked a subject that I was good at, or a subject that interested me. I didn't really have any plans to pursue a long-term career in it. I just learned like, oh, this subject I can maybe see myself studying, or this subject interests me, I can see myself studying it on my own time, so I just picked that. I mean, shit, I got a scholarship. It was not like it was coming out of my own pocket. That's what a way to think, right? But that's how I thought. And even now, thinking about the future kind of draws a blank from it. Like that common interview question, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And that's always the hardest question I have trouble coming up with an answer for, or creating a lie for, because it's not a question I think about a lot. I am getting a bit better about that though, because some of the friends I've made, for one, brutally attack me if I say anything that negative sounding, and for two, they kind of keep me on track. They kind of monitor the progress I made, and they're quick to tell me how much progress I've made over the past year or so. So they kind of stop me from regressing to an extent. So yeah, that's definitely one of my challenges, coming up with goals and sticking with the goals. But having that support group around makes it possible. Definitely makes it easier, but in my case and maybe some other cases, it definitely makes it more possible to have a support group that's tracking your progress, that's encouraging you. If anything, it's making you culpable. It makes you more likely to do it if people know where you're coming from and what you're aiming for. Another obstacle that I'm making small strides towards getting better about is just dealing with, I guess, the relationship and emotional blocks I've had. And I think these videos are, I guess, pretty big proof that I'm starting to get over that. Because I may have mentioned this in another video, but talking about stuff like this is not the easiest thing to do. And I didn't really tend to let people into stuff like this. But I am getting a bit better about that. Due, again, in no small part to the friends I made brutally attacking me if I leave stuff out, or if I don't mention stuff, or if they don't hear from me in a long time. Granted, one friend in particular doesn't really need a reason to brutally attack me, and that's always fun. But those are the two main things that I'm trying to work on and make myself better about. And I think once I can get a handle on those two things, caring about the future and being more open with myself, with people, then that will tend to open up things for the future. And I think that that's one of the main things that people who suffer from depression and anxiety really need. They need, we need people, maybe not people equipped to deal with sufferers of depression and anxiety, but just people willing to listen. And some tips for people who may know somebody that suffers from these things. More often than not, we don't really, when we share what's going through our heads, and when we share how we feel about ourselves, we're probably not looking specifically for advice, or at least I tend not to look for advice. I'm definitely not going to turn down advice, but my point in sharing it wasn't really to get advice. A lot of times when they share stuff, we're just looking for some sympathy and some understanding and some companionship. More often than not, you can just stand there and listen and not say anything, and we'll still feel a bit better, provided that we get the sense that you really do care. Because more often than not, or at least in my case, I already feel like I'm burdening people by talking about it. And if I get the feeling that you don't really want to hear it, or if you respond with something kind of flippant or throwaway, like you'll feel better later, or somebody else has it worse, or I'm sad, I've been sad sometimes too, then that doesn't really do much for me, and it'll just make me less likely to talk about it in the future. I'll just go back to keeping it to myself. And yeah, as I mentioned before, there are definitely people that have had it worse, and I and others are well aware of that. It doesn't really make us feel better. If anything, that just makes us feel worse. Like, what right have we to feel the way that we do when there's other people suffering a lot worse than we are? And that just compounds the reason for keeping silent for so long. But that is one of the main ways that you can help somebody who you think might be depressed or anxious about something, or in general, and don't know of many ways to make them feel better. Like, if you just provide like a listening ear, then that will improve their mood. You may not seem so. It may not seem like it'll improve their mood. It may not seem like it'll make them happier, but they will appreciate it. And especially with long-term cases like myself, you're definitely not going to see much of an improvement overnight, or even over weeks or months. I mean, this is something that I've been dealing with for over a decade. I don't expect to make a full 180 anytime soon. And if you're determined to help somebody who you think is depressed, then please have some patience. There's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times. There'll be times where you think that your friend or whoever you're helping is completely cured because they've just seemed happier, they've just seemed more jokey. But they can very easily go back to being dour and having kind of a downcast look. And that's just something that happens. Hell, people who know me, I have pretty much the same sense of humor, regardless of whether or not I'm happy or I'm down. And that's the thing, like, if it's really strong, you may be able to sense when we're maybe not as depressed as usual, but sometimes we just hide it that well. And again, it just takes patience. Like, dealing with this, I put dealing in quotes and that's probably the wrong word to use, but dealing with myself and others who may be depressed or anxious, it's a challenge, but it might be one of the nicest things you could do. It really is. I think that's good for one video, so I will see you guys later.